Good afternoon and welcome to AIADA's AutoTalk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. Before we get started, a few quick reminders as always. Anyone who has registered for today's program will be receiving a copy by early next week. And if you have any questions, be sure to enter them into the Q&A bar at the lower right-hand side of your interface. Today we welcome back Doug Austin, CEO at StrategicSource. Doug, I know you have a lot to get to today, so I'll let you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Rachel. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here today. Topic of today's webinar is the importance of shopping your EV equipment. Caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. There's a lot of considerations to make as you start to integrate EV into your operation, and I hope to help you avoid a few of those landmines today. A little bit about StrategicSource. We're veteran owned, 25 years in spend management. We did about 2,100 to 2,200 sourcing projects last year. So we've sourced a number of EV projects. We are supplier independent, meaning we don't get any compensation. So this is not a commercial for any supplier in particular. We don't operate that way. So what we're going to talk about today is the type of equipment that dealers are purchasing. We'll talk a little bit about dealer risks, expected costs and opportunities, and then an approach that I would suggest that you take. There's an awful lot of both facility improvements and technology and equipment involved. So we'll help you navigate some of that today. So let's start with equipment dealers are purchasing. Purchasing and installing chargers at your dealerships is a complex proposition. You're going to need to be thinking about it if you haven't done this already. Site surveys, utility implications, certainly chargers, but there are a host of related components that you're going to need to consider buying as well as software and maintenance. What we're going to do today, we've gone out for quote on this equipment before a number of times, and I've highlighted a lot of the elements of those RFQs, those requests for quotes, in this presentation, so that you can be prepared for all of the different items that you have to buy, and beware of some of the upsell opportunities that suppliers are going to throw at you. Let's talk a little bit about charging stations, and I'm learning this as we go too. But right now there's three types of EV charging stations: a level 1, which is typically in the home; a level 2, which can also be in the home, but is in a lot of dealership applications; and then the DC fast charge. Obviously, the level 2 and the DC fast charge will charge the vehicles quicker, and certainly are more expensive to purchase and operate. And you can see some of the charging loads, the amps that are reflected here in this chart. But that's really some of the options that you have available. At the end of this session, we're also going to talk about upsell opportunities that you have in the dealership for selling equipment if you're not doing that already. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of components. It's not just a charger. We're talking about, controllers and software and cables and sockets. There's a lot of options here, whether you have a single port or dual port, surge protection, on and on and on. This is a pretty complex purchase. And I would also caution you, this is somewhat analogous in some ways to the LED lighting activities that went on a few years back when LED lighting in parking lots took off. There was a lot of suppliers that jumped into the market quickly, and we'll talk about the need to be careful of who you're dealing with. Make sure that you've got references and vet and validate those suppliers, because you don't want to be operating with fly-by-night organizations. So what are some of the things you're going to probably have to purchase in your EV installations in your dealership. So certainly charger hardware and holsters, RFID cards to track and manage vehicle charging. There's probably going to be subscriptions for software, dashboard, power sharing capabilities you're going to be um, introduced to. We certainly want to look at labor, warranty, parts and labor, and remote technical support. This equipment does fail. There are additional power modules that you will be faced with purchasing. You've got a physical enclosure for the power modules that can hold up to 5 modules. We're going to be looking at a concrete mounting template used in the foundation to mount that equipment. There's mounting brackets, and there's obviously the pedestal. There's touch displays, cameras, holsters, credit card readers if you're going to resell electricity, and RFID readers as well. So there's a host of equipment and support requirements coming your way. Again, fleet management software. There's an element called a power block. You're going to have to look at warranties on that. Warranties on your power links, and including labor, technical support, on-site repairs. There's power link commissioning, power block commissioning. That is getting all of this turned on and getting reporting going. There's a final commissioning, a validation checklist that has to occur. There's energy management software. There's maintenance equipment, corrosion prevention, cable seals and wires. And then, of course, there's freight and delivery of all this equipment, too. If, we're talking about 18 different components here that might be involved in this purchase. And when you consider the facility implications, utility implications, this is a lot to manage. So it might be worth considering a project manager of some sort to manage all of these components. Anybody's interested in a copy of this presentation, I know some people need to leave early. Text us at 612-386-3898. If you would include your cell phone number there, we will, or your email, we will get that back to you as quickly as we can. And I know Rachel will be pushing this out as well, but if you want a copy today, I've got folks standing by ready to provide that. Let's talk a little bit about dealer risks. Caveat emptor, I learned in business school, let the buyer beware. That's certainly the environment right now. Prices swing wildly for this equipment. And, I'm not sure I can give you much guidance today other than showing you some ranges that have ridiculous gaps in between, but we'll do our best to show you what we've seen. Potential EV dealer risks. Make sure that you understand what you need. What is the correct scope? I'll show you an illustration of that in a minute. Make sure you understand what the OEM has for charging requirements and supplier recommendations. There's a number of them out here, both domestic and foreign, that have recommended suppliers. So before you delve too deeply, you want to explore what the OEM is recommending. There are certainly local, state, and federal incentives that apply right now. Every state is different. We'll mention a couple of them here, but take a look at that, because there are certainly dollars and funds out there that will help offset some of your costs. Or work with a utility company to ensure access to the power you need. Obviously, that's you're going to have to pull the utility companies in. We're going to need number 5 to define your general equipment needs. And one of the things I'd like to do, we prefer to go out and go out for quote, meaning we tell the supplier exactly what we need, the quantity, the color, the specifications, and so forth. But there's a different way to approach that too, and that's a request for proposal. So you may want to go to the suppliers and give them a general scope of what you're trying to accomplish, and let them bring a proposal back to you that makes sense. Then when you get to the point of analysis, try to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. Number 7, and I can't stress this enough, source multiple suppliers because pricing can swing 40% or more. This is true whether you're doing a home project in your yard, landscaping, but it's certainly true in any one-time or repetitive purchase in a dealership as well. Shopping three or four suppliers helps you to establish truth in the marketplace. You start to understand if you're comparing apples to apples, what does the high-end supplier look like? What does the low-end supplier look like? And then kind of, to the extent that you vetted and validated those suppliers, then make your decision. Number 8, secure references. Again, there's many new suppliers entering this space. References, while it seems a bit innocuous and time-consuming, it might save you a lot of grief down the road. Again, I harken back to my LED parking lot installation days. There's a lot of scam operators out there that may not have the financial backing. You may be putting big down payments down on equipment, as we saw in the lighting environment. And if the company doesn't have the wherewithal, the financial muscle behind them, you may be out some serious dollars if they fold up. So let the buyer beware. So consider at least 5 different charging locations. Certainly the front of the dealership, where you're going to have folks coming in with cars that may need to be charged. You're going to probably need capabilities within your showroom for vehicles that are there to charge as well. You need to consider your service department, not only for repairs of electric vehicles, but for testing of electric vehicles. You have a back lot to consider. As you're bringing vehicles in, you may want to have charging stations back there. And also in the parts department, think about not only where you're at today, but where are you going to be 5 years from now? Is it possible that you'll have delivery trucks that are electric, delivering parts to other dealerships, making pickups at parts stores? So there's 5 areas that I think you want to consider as you start to scope out the EV charging locations within your dealership. Maybe you don't have to install all the chargers there today, but when you're having the utilities dig up the ground and prepare the space, it might be good to to put some cable in those particular areas so that you're ready at some point down the road to ramp up and get new chargers installed. There's some considerations that you need to think of when you're buying equipment, and I think that a project manager of some sort, whether it's from your supplier, whether it's somebody that you work with today, might make sense because there's so many pieces here to this moving puzzle. And I would have to say too that prices and equipment offerings are changing, incentives are changing. This is a very dynamic environment right now. Number 1, again, OEM programs. What does the factory require? What do they support? What kind of incentives are available? Number 2, incentives. Again, what local, state, and federal incentives are available for you? Location of chargers. Shorter runs from electrical panels are less costly. It's less trenching. So that's something you need to consider. Chargers. The needs will expand. Will your delivery trucks be electric at some time? Parking, showroom. What's the power rating? Do you want a level 2 charger? Most of those chargers are going to provide 25 miles of charge an hour. What is it? What are your objectives here? Do we want on the port side? Do we want a single port with 1 plug, or do we want to go with a dual port, 2 plugs? It's going to be more costly, but it might be more effective. Load management. You can decrease costs by having a load management system. So it's a separate circuit for each charger. It's more expensive, but your utility costs are probably going to decline. Manufacturer, we're going to want to find reputable supplier again with references, proper safety certifications. We want to make sure that we procure a quality product and service. You know, the downside right now is that there's just not a lot of longevity. There's not a lot of EV charging stations in place. So warranties are going to be important. We're going to want, you know, they're going to range from 1 to 3 years, but you might want to look at some extended warranties on this equipment because there's just not a lot of history in the marketplace in terms of what works and what the sustainability is going to be. Number 9, maintenance. Ensure that the supplier can support the charger over the useful life, and you know what those costs are going to be so that you can budget accordingly. Number 10, ADA issues. You know, a project designer should be thinking about the paths, the parking areas, the ramps, handrails, all of those things that are going to be necessary relative to ADA issues. Expansion. You might as well anticipate expansion. Again, trenching is expensive, but stubbing might be the way to go. Stub electric and power to certain areas, and then open ground up later and add your charging equipment at that time. Cable management. You know, automatic retractable cable management is going to be less dangerous. There's less trip hazards and will prolong the life of equipment. If you live in northern snowy states, that's going to be important so that you don't have equipment laying in the snow and the rain. Signage, you're going to have to look at ADA compliant signage, you know, and restricting customers from parking in certain areas with internal combustion engines. Keep those folks out of those areas and leave it for your EV clients. Striping, you might need to spruce up that EV area and again try to deter non-EVs from parking there. You want to make sure that these areas are easily accessible. Difficult charging sessions can lead to negative comments and social media posts. There's a lot of activity on that online, so make it easy for these customers. Electricity costs. Systems are costly. Limiting access or even charging for access will be more common in the future, but you have to consider the electricity costs as well. There are a lot of different plug types, and there are adapters, as you probably know today, that will modify chargers. Most EV owners, as I understand it, I don't own an EV, will have a range of adapters with them so that they can, you know, convert electricity from one adapter to another. But there's a listing there of the different adapters. There are going to be network fees, network and non-network chargers. Network chargers are smart and can cost, you know, $150 to $300 a year just in software alone for the charger. You may want to consider a dedicated EV meter. Electric companies can give you that meter and that electricity at a cheaper rate than your regular electricity. So inquire about that. There's an added cost for the meter and the panel, but it might be well worth the cost. And the good news is you can track consumption. So, what are some of the costs and opportunities associated with EV installations? Well, some things that I would consider or would have you consider when you're buying this equipment is to be clear about your business requirements with the suppliers. It's not only the pricing for the charger and the equipment, but we want to get firm pricing for 12 months. We want to get firm pricing for the length of the contract so that, you know, the price increases don't go off the guardrails and you start to get surprised. So try to tighten that up, lock that pricing down just as you would for office supplies, shop supplies, credit bureaus, credit cards, lock the pricing. Get early payment terms. If you're in a position to pay early, then take advantage of it. Try to get 210 net 30. Pay your invoices early and enjoy a discount. Make sure that your service is fully warranted on the service side. That all the installation work that is going to occur, that it's warranted, and that you don't have to pay service calls when things break down. Is there any internet ordering available for supplies and equipment? Are we getting delivered pricing, or are we going to have to pay for freight separately? You can negotiate that, and that's something you ought to consider. Number 7, product warranty and return policy. So, what is the life of the equipment and the service, and what kind of return policy can you get? What are the customer service hours? If something breaks down at 6 o'clock at night, are you stuck, or do you have somebody that can take care of you? Volume rebates. If you're going to be purchasing in volumes here, there ought to be some sort of discount available for this equipment. Number 10, references. Make sure that you get references. Also inquire about rebates. Number 11, can we pay these purchases with a credit card? Because if you can, there's another 1.5 discount that we can get. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't want to be dealing with you're already going to be dealing with a utility, but whatever vendor that you select, try to get a single sales contact, a single point of contact, to keep the repairs and the maintenance simple. So these are some business requirements that you should be looking for as you make these purchases. Insurance. Will the supplier provide a certificate of insurance? What are the dollar limits? What's the lead time? What kind of electrical infrastructure is needed? Your utility will be able to tell you that, but your vendor is going to have a perspective on that as well. Be clear about the number of vehicles that can be charged at the same time, the estimated number of partial and full charges per day. That's going to be important as you start to understand capacity. What's the estimated time per charge? What's the lifespan of the unit before it needs to be replaced? We'll talk about that more in a minute. Is it a capital expenditure, or is it an operating expense? Number 20, does the machine take credit cards? Do you want to resell electricity at some point? Probably not, but that is an option. Is the machine on a dealer charging network? Do you have contractors? Ask the supplier, do they have contractors that can be utilized for the install? And if so, get that install price separately from the equipment. Don't let them bundle it, because you'll hide a lot of the expense in there. You want that broken out. Is the site survey required? And if so, can it be done virtually? I had work done on my home recently with some landscape contractors, and it's amazing what they can do with satellite images. They might be able to do the same thing for your dealership. Number 24, the estimated time it takes to see an ROI per unit. Any other comments? But again, these are questions that you should be asking not just one supplier, but all the suppliers. You can put them together in a list of business requirements, then have them fill that out, put them in a grid, and you can evaluate your suppliers across the board. Some best practices. Again, there are federal incentives out there that can cover up to 30% of the cost of an EV station. So certainly take a look at that. There are state incentives that are offering rather tax breaks for EV charging stations, oftentimes a rebate for each port. There are municipalities that are offering incentives as well. So take a look at all of that within your local, state, and federal environment, and see if you can get some help here to offset some of your investment. Lastly, I would say, talk to your accountant. Can this investment be deducted as an operating expense, with operating funds, or is it going to have to be capitalized? Chances are it's going to have to be capitalized and depreciated, but talk to your accountant about that to see, how you want to handle that going forward. There's going to be opportunities out here as well on the sales side and the accessory side. The parts department could begin selling EV related products like home chargers, portable chargers, charger adapters, which we spoke about just a few minutes ago. When a owner pulls up to a charging station, he doesn't have the right adapter. You can be the provider of those adapters. Certainly, extension cords, cord holders. There's more. We had a supplier do a webinar on our platform in January of this year. It sells a lot of accessories to dealers and sells direct on Amazon. Been very successful. I think they're even selling them in Home Depot and Lowe's as well. So there is a business out there, and this is one that you shouldn't overlook and should probably take a look at, because you can probably pull some additional top line sales into the dealership as well. Let's look at costs. Boy, this was a tough chart to fill out. We saw level 2 charging stations as low as $5,000 and as high as $60,000. We saw level 3 or the quick charge from 30,000 to 80,000. So there is a significant gap out there, and I would just suggest to you that get multiple quotes here. Don't go with the first quote that you see. We also tried to identify, what are the installation costs? Well, it can be as much from as little as $500 up to $50,000, depending on the type of equipment that you're putting in. The estimated yearly maintenance between $400 and $1,500, non-warranty maintenance. Software cost monthly is going to be significant and could be $360 to $500. And then a site survey can cost $1,500 to $2,500. I would say that the other thing that you're going to want to take a look at when you're quoting with suppliers is lead time. Generally, the level 1 and level 2 chargers are kind of off the shelf, more readily available. Some of the level 2 and the quick charge machines can have a long lead time. So make sure that you understand what those lead times are. And again, coordinate that with your internal resource or your project manager. So we've covered a lot of information here. Let's talk about a suggested approach. How do you go forward with this? Well, my recommendation is select a project manager to manage all these pieces, whether it's an individual, a team member, maybe it's a supplier to manage all of these tasks for you. And then number 2, build your supplier requirements. Go back to those 19 steps and outline exactly what you want. From there, build your quote or invite suppliers to give you a proposal. But build an RFQ so that ultimately you're able to compare apples to apples with your suppliers. Number 4, source qualified suppliers. Again, references are important. There's a lot of qualified suppliers that may not be interested in your business for whatever reason. I can't tell you how many times we reach out to suppliers and they don't call back. So business must be pretty good. But you're going to want to get interested, qualified, and competent suppliers. 5, we're going to want to analyze the supplier results, compare those results, use a matrix, use a grid to compare those responses, vertical and horizontal. Get all that information, and so you can make an informed decision. When those prices come in, just because you've asked for a quote doesn't mean you can't negotiate. If you see some more enticing pricing from a supplier, but you really don't feel comfortable going with that supplier, well, then use some of that pricing to negotiate with the vendor that you prefer. So identify those higher cost items, whether it's equipment or services, with your leading suppliers, and negotiate those prices till you get to a point where you're comfortable. Again, check those references, verify satisfaction with not only equipment, but the support levels, the services, the warranty levels, and so forth. Ultimately, you need to make a decision, make an executive decision, either individual or a team, and then launch that project. There are going to be a lot of moving pieces out here. So you need to build a project plan with key due dates, and the equipment availability is going to be key here. And you're going to want to make sure that you test this equipment before you go live. So number 10, test, audit, maintain the equipment, and then manage. So we want to manage performance and results. So this is kind of sourcing 101. You would use this same approach if you were shopping for HVAC maintenance or equipment, or even going after a quote on credit bureaus or office supplies. This is kind of a similar process, minus a few testing steps. But this is a simple sourcing process that, if you follow this, should lead you to a pretty good result at the other end. So at this point, any questions that we have in the from the attendees so far?
Doug, we had one question come in. How would a dealership sell EV chargers? Would they have to team up with an EV charger supplier and inform the consumer?
That's a great question. So there is a company, and the name escapes me. I'm a senior citizen, but the name escapes me, that did a webinar with us. In fact, he stopped into the booth at NADA, that can hook you up. So reach out to me at daustin@strategicsource.com, and I can get that information over to you. But they are a wholesaler, and they can provide all of the equipment that you want to resell within your parts department. If anybody's interested, either give me a call, daustin@strategicsource.com, or reach out to Chris at 612-386-3898. I will get him that information before the end of the day, and then we can push that out. But yeah, my advice is to get a wholesaler that can get that to you, so you have an appropriate opportunity to make a good markup.
Doug, thanks so much for joining us today. This was a really great and informative presentation. And if anyone has extra questions, like Doug said, you can contact him or reach out to me, and I will pass them along to Doug. You will all also be receiving a copy of this webinar by early next week. So we'll send you the slide deck and the recording of the webinar. For more information about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone.